Advent. And today we're going to continue on with this All Is Bright thing. And I remember a couple weeks ago, we were out and about. We were just out walking, and it was the whole family. And as we were walking, there was a big group of people around us, and it was kind of, everybody was like, distanced. It was outside, but we were like in this big group of people, and I didn't know anybody else there. We were just walking. As we were walking, there was this thing that happened in the sky. And Marie noticed it first. She was like, guys, look up at the sky, look up there. And there was somebody who decided to do some skywriting, like in an airplane, you know what I'm talking about? Like they decided that they would leave apparently smoke trails from their airplane that would spell out words, which is really exciting. What an interesting art form that is, isn't it? I don't know how you get certified. I don't know how you do this, but this guy, he decided he was going to leave these trails through the sky, and he was spelling something out. And it started out with a J and an E and an S and then a U and then an S. And it clearly said Jesus. And then he went back and he decided to write another line of the same word, Jesus. Then there was a third time where he came back and made a third pass, and he wrote Jesus really big in the sky. And as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, wow, this is very interesting. This guy keeps writing the name Jesus. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, wow, like I wonder what other people around me are thinking about this. As I see this up in the sky, what does everybody else think about this? Like, is this weird for anybody else? Is this good for people? What do people have thoughts when they see this name Jesus? What are their immediate reactions that they come up with, right? And so Jane is standing next to me, my daughter, and she's 9, she's almost 10. She looks at me and she's like, Dad, why are they writing the name Jesus up in the sky? And I had this moment, I don't know if you've had these moments where like there's so much confusion and like so much chaos. There's a lack of clarity when it comes to that. Because as I saw it, I was thinking, oh no, like how do I explain this? How do I explain why they're writing Jesus in the sky? I know this seems like a simple question, but I was like, how do I explain this? In context of everybody around me, I'm thinking about what Jane's thinking about. I'm thinking about what everybody else is thinking about it. Thinking about the people that like this name, the people that don't like this name. Thinking about those people who might just think he's writing Jesus and it's a Hispanic skywriter. I don't know. Maybe he has a friend, And so I'm like trying to think of all these different explanations of why he might be doing this. How do I explain to my child that maybe he's trying to evangelize through skywriting, which is a new form of that? Maybe how do I explain to her that maybe not everybody around us loves Jesus and that's a whole nother thought process? How do I explain to her that there's so much going on when you see this name, that there might be some people around us who don't like this name, who have an adverse reaction to what they're seeing in the sky? How do you explain all that in 1 second? And so I'm having all these thoughts, and Jane just looks back at me and she's like, before I can even answer her question, before I can even come up with a response, she looks back at me and answers her own question, and she goes, they're probably writing it because it's almost Christmas. I was like, that's a great answer, Jane. That's a good work. And we moved on very quickly, and that was it. Now, it's amazing when you think about this whole thing of Christmas, when you think about this whole thing of Jesus, how like purpose and meaning are so simple for kids, aren't they? Like purpose, meaning, the things behind the things are not so hard for kids to understand. I wonder if this is why Christmas is mostly a kid's holiday. Like, if we're being honest, it's a kid's holiday. It is a child's holiday. I mean, that's why you have a nativity set up in your house, is because, let's face it, a nativity is just a set of action figures. I mean, stuff you can play with, You have the shepherd versus wiseman battles sometimes. It's pretty intense. Oh, man, that shepherd hit him with his hook, and that wiseman came back with the myrrh, or whatever. And you have maybe it's a kid's holiday for that reason. There's no other reason that in a holiday like this, you would celebrate a little drummer boy, because that's something only a child would do. No mother or parent of any sort would be like, I just got this baby to sleep. I hope a drummer comes by and plays a drum really loud for him. That's what I'm hoping to have happen next. No, that's something that your child would do. Your child would be the one who's like, hey, there's a sleeping baby. I wonder if he wants to hear some drums. I bet he'd love this, right? I mean, that's why I think it's a child's holiday. And I actually think that's a good thing, because I think as we get older, purpose, meaning, the things that are identity within us, they get more and more convoluted. They get more and more confusing, right? They get more and more chaotic, actually, as we get older. If I was to ask you when you were a child about the meaning and the purpose of your life, you would probably have a pretty succinct answer. It would probably be fairly quick, and you could probably give me something that's very simple. But if I ask you now, there is so much wrapped up in that, isn't there? There's so many other things. And I don't know the experiences in your life that have made this more complicated and more convoluted. I don't know what those situations are, but I can guarantee you that probably something with a person There's probably been like a relationship that's happened, something probably with a person that has made things more complicated, where you once thought things were simple, and then you were maybe betrayed for the first time, you were hurt for the first time, you lost somebody for the first time, and it changed the way you perceived how life was supposed to go, the purpose and the meaning behind it. Maybe it's been something professionally, where you thought you had something figured out, and maybe your profession changed, or you were let go from a job, or you had a falling out with somebody at work, whatever that might look like, and suddenly everything changed. It got more convoluted, got more complicated, right? Maybe it's something even just personally, something that happened, a trauma that happened in your life, where somehow the purpose and the meaning of your life was so simple and so straightforward in your life, and somehow something happened that just created this complicated version of that meaning. And today, I know that it's a tough case. I understand this. Don't get me wrong. I understand it's a tough case to talk about like the meaning of life on a Sunday morning. So I hope you had your coffee, because this is a big one right here. But I want to get into some of the purpose and the meaning, not just behind Christmas, although that's a part of it. I want to get to the purpose and the meaning of why we exist, what we're here for, the whole reason this stuff happens. And I want to get into that purpose and meaning a little bit, because I think there's something that happens as we talk about light that sheds a literal light on this exact thing. And so last week, if you weren't here, I'll just catch you up really quickly, and you can go back and watch it online. But just really quickly, a quick synopsis of what happened last week. We began all the way back in Genesis chapter 1. We kind of looked at the theology of light, where this whole thing comes from. And I'm just going to really quickly, I want you to see this one more time, because today it has big implications. Genesis 1, very first verse, very first like book of the Bible, very first words that were ever written and recorded in the Hebrew text here. It says this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness, notice the opposite of light. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Many people call this, theologians call this the chaotic waters, because at this time there was no order. There was no purpose. There was no meaning. Things were just there. We don't know what it was. Again, remember, it's interesting that water is already there. God doesn't create water. For some reason, water's already there, but they call it the chaotic waters because there was no order. There was no purpose. There was no meaning behind anything. Things were just existing, but there was nothing going on that made order or sense out of these things. But then the next verse says, and God said. And God said, God spoke into the chaos. He spoke into the confusion. He spoke into this convoluted mess that was darkness. And he speaks and he says, let there be light. The very first command in the entire Bible, the first command is the first thing he puts in order of everything else is he puts light there. Why? Because light, when it shines on the darkness, there can no longer be confusion, right? When light is there, you can see clearly what is ahead of you. A few weeks ago, I decided to go for a bike ride. It was a terrible idea. It was early in the morning. We left about 4:30 in the morning to go on this bike ride to go down to Clearwater, and we were going to ride to an office there, and that I work at, and I was just going to be dropped off by some other guys. They were going to ride their bikes back. But as we got going, we realized that only one of us had a light on their bike. And it was very, very, very dark. And so we're riding on the Pinellas Trail under all this canopy of trees. There is no light in the sky. There is nothing around us. And we're following the one person who has a light. And I will say, there came a moment where I thought something was going to murder me as it jumped out of the bushes and it came roaring at me. And that thing was a bunny rabbit. It was like this little tiny bunny rabbit. But man, in the darkness, I was like, this is it. This is where it ends. I die on a bike because something is going to eat me. It was a rabbit. It was fine. But in the darkness, you don't see these things. In the darkness, there is chaos, there is confusion. But when light is brought into that, as soon as you can see that what that is, right, it takes it away. There is no longer that. I read not long ago that there is actually, if you were to take the fog that surrounds up to 6 city blocks, if you were to take all that fog that can cover 6 city blocks, and you were to take all the water out of that fog, that water would fit in a single 8-ounce glass. But it's amazing how much it clouds everything around it, right? It covers so much. And sometimes what we need is we need light to show us how things really look, what things really feel like, how things really are. I would say this is even true of our own lives, right? Is that this is how God shines a light into our lives to show us what's really going on in our own hearts. because sometimes we need an outside perspective. We need an outside light to shine into us, to show us what's really happening even in our own lives. See, what we see from the beginning of time is that God is setting up something where light symbolizes not just sin, and that is true. Light shows that darkness will not overcome the light, right? That there is darkness and light, there is sin and there is good, right? There's bad and good in the world. There's that. Those two things obviously are part of light and dark, but it also shows us that God is setting up the idea of confusion and clarity. That light also shows us chaos, confusion, convolutedness, or it can show us clarity, and that's something else that God came to do. That God speaks into our lives. This is why we say over and over again, if you've ever been around a prayer circle, you know people pray this all the time, that God is not a God of confusion. Why? Because God is a God of light. And he does not bring darkness and chaos and confusion. Instead, he makes order. And he speaks and he says, let there be light. And it says after that, and there was light. And God called the light day, verse 5, and the darkness night. And there was evening and there was morning. The first day we talked about why evening first and morning second, and why that happens so much. Anyways, that is what we see at the very beginning of the Bible. Now, you're going to need to hold on to some of those pieces because they're going to come up here in just a second. And then what we see is in Isaiah chapter 9, about 700 BC, we talked about this real quickly, is that Isaiah, as a prophet, he writes this beautiful verse in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, and this is kind of his big prophecy about Jesus, but he says this in verse 2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. He's prophesying that there's going to be this one that will come who will bring light. He will bring light and life to those who need it so badly. So then when we get to John, what we're going to be today, if you have your Bible, I would encourage you to go there because we're going to be in John chapter 1 all morning here. This is where we're going to stay. John chapter 1. I want you to kind of see what's going on in John chapter 1. Because what happens in the Christmas story, and I think this is interesting, in the Christmas story, we have different accounts, right? You have Matthew's account, you have Luke's account, and then you have this guy John's account. And if you look through how they write their Gospels, I think John's is the most, I will say, John chapter 1, to me, honestly, this is full disclosure, I think it may be the most brilliant chapter that is written in the entire Bible. It is so dense. We will not have time to get into all of it, but it is just so impressive what he's writing. And if you pay attention, again, in a kind of a kid's theme, in Matthew, you see kind of a story of Jesus, and they zoom in. They start with the lineage of Jesus, right? Matthew starts with the whole lineage of Jesus, where he came from, who he is, and then they zoom in on Jesus. And then Mark is kind of the Grinch of the Gospels, like where he doesn't say anything about Christmas. Like he just skips right over it. He dives in with the baptism. He doesn't even get to it. And then Luke does the thing where he talks about everything. Luke is where you're going to find the best Christmas stories. That's where Linus is going to come up with his blanket, and he's going to start. In those days, when Caesar Augustus was in, you're going to have the whole thing. By the way, my wife can quote the entire monologue that Linus does, which comes straight out of Luke 2. This is a good way to teach your kids the Bible, guys, is just have them watch the Peanuts movie on repeat. And so this whole thing, this is where you see it is in Luke. But when John writes, remember this, and I just really quickly, let me give you a quick caveat. When John writes, John is writing his gospel. John was one of Jesus' closest friends. John was like one of his boys. Like he had Peter, James, and John, his three closest disciples. John's one of those closest guys. And when John writes his gospel, he writes it totally differently. So Matthew's writing early on, and Mark's writing early on. Luke writes a little bit later. But when John is writing his gospel, it's almost 70 years later. And most people at this point have started to give up on the idea of Jesus coming back. Remember when Jesus dies and he's resurrected, most people thought he would come back to earth for them in like maybe 3 days, maybe 40 days. But at this point, it's been years and years, decades have passed, and people are starting to go, I don't know that this Jesus guy is coming back for us. I'm not sure it is what we thought it was. And really the belief is that most people pressured John to write this gospel. They said, John, we need you to write something because you were there with Jesus. You were one of the few people who was like walking with him day after day. We need you to write something. And so when John writes, he doesn't zoom in on the Christmas story. In fact, John kind of zooms out. And he does this whole thing where he looks at both the history and the mystery of Jesus. Like, let me give you this massive view of who Jesus is and where he comes from, and especially why Jesus came. And this why will not just be about why Jesus is here. This why is going to be about why you and I are here. It's going to answer all of the questions. And when John writes, he writes completely differently than anybody else. In fact, most of the Gospel of John is about 75% of the stories in the book of John you will not find in any other book, any other gospel. He writes completely uniquely because he knows there's other things people haven't covered yet. It's like he knew instantly at this point, like when Mark wrote, he didn't know that everybody was going to read his book to this day. He probably didn't know that. When Matthew wrote, he might not have known that we were all still going to read his book to this day. When Luke wrote, he probably thought he was writing just to a small group of people, not to the whole world. But when John writes, it's like he knew I'm writing a bestseller from day one. Like I'm going into this and everybody's going to read this. And so I want to have a totally different view, and I want to have the biggest, most pronounced view of who Jesus is. And so he starts his book with this line. Notice this in John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay, so right off the bat, just notice right off the bat, what's the very first line? This is, by the way, this is plagiarism. This is plagiarism. He starts off with this line, in the beginning. Most people thought John was a heretic when he wrote this, because where does that line come from? It comes from Genesis 1, what we just read. What's the very first line of the entire Bible? In the beginning. John's starting all the way back at the very beginning. And he's saying two things, which I think is interesting. He's pointing backwards, but he's also pointing forwards, because what he's saying is there was a beginning then, but the good news is there's also a new beginning now because of Jesus. Everything that's happened has happened, but because Jesus is here, there's a new beginning. But at the same time, he's pointing back and saying, in the beginning. Now notice this too. He doesn't say from the beginning, right? This isn't a from the beginning moment. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say from the beginning, like a once upon a time type of thing. He's saying once upon before there was time. That's what he's trying to say here. Like, did anybody watch that movie when you were a kid called Land Before Time? Probably one of the greatest films of all time. It had Littlefoot and Ducky and all these dinosaurs. It was adorable. Does anybody remember this film? It's really good stuff. Yeah. But what he's saying is this is not even the land before time. This is before even before Ducky and Petrie and Littlefoot existed. This is the land before. This is way before. He says in the beginning, not from the beginning, because there's no beginning to Jesus. In the beginning. This is why when we sing sometimes, we sing this song, What a Beautiful Name. You guys know this song? The very beginning of that song says, you were the Word at the beginning. You were the Word at the beginning. And it's a beautiful line, but what we see here is that it's not just from the beginning. He was in the beginning. Before there was form, before there was order, while there was still chaos, he was there. Jesus was there in the beginning. Now, again, this is plagiarized. This would be like if this is fully on purpose. This would be like if I told you, like, if your husband said to you, for instance, I saw this great new movie coming out. I'm pretty sure it's a rom-com. You're going to love it. And he took you to a theater and he was like, listen, the guy who wrote this movie, it's all brand new. There's these things, they were called movie theaters. They used to exist. And he took you to a theater and he was like, you're going to love this. It's this new romantic comedy, new writer, new actors. I mean, you're going to love it though. It's all brand new. And then you went there, and as soon as it started, the movie was like completely not what you expected. And the very first thing that happens is text starts scrawling up on the screen. It says like, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And you'd be like, hold on a second. I call foul, sir. And you just realize you walked into something that had been written a long time ago, something by somebody else. That's what John's doing here, but he's doing it on purpose. He wants you to see that this is a combination of not just what's happening now, but what happened then. Because in the beginning was the Word. Now this word here was is actually, it's called an imperfect durative. It's not a fun thing to talk about. But what it means here is it does not mean was as though it ended. The imperfect durative is a word that means it's still going. So it doesn't just mean that it was the Word at the beginning, that there was this Word and it continues on to this very day. It's like something was set down right in the middle of the action and it continues to this day. So in the beginning was, and you're like, are we going to do this word by word? This can take all day. Yeah. Was the Word. And this word right here, I think we have to stop for a while on, because I think John does one of the most brilliant things that has ever happened in the Bible right here with the word he uses for the word, okay? So this might be confusing, because if you think about this, you're like, why is Jesus called the word? Why is he talking about Jesus in this term? It's a very confusing term. Was the word. Now, the word here in Greek is logos or logos, okay? And if you read this in the Greek, it's a very simple phrase. It's in arche logos. Like in arche logos is all it says there. In the beginning is what that means, was the word. And the word logos is a powerful word that he uses here. Now, some people believe, okay, there's three options on why it's logos, and I'll tell you in a second what my favorite thing is about this. But the very first thing that people think is that logos is because it is a word. It literally means a word. And so, at the beginning of time, what did we see when God created the heavens and the earth? When he started to bring order into chaos, the very first thing he does is he speaks, and he says, "Let there be light." Light is created by a word. Right? God speaks a word and we get light. We start to see this chaos, this confusion become clear because God speaks. And therefore it's a word. And that's why the word is here. Now that's a good idea, and I think it's probably true. I think what John does here is this word has so many meanings. None of them are wrong. The second is that it means a logo. A logo, meaning like logos, the word logos, it means like a logo. Like you're familiar with logos, right? We have a couple here. Like if you see this logo, you know what it is, right? You're instantly familiar with what this comes from, right? This is Starbucks. Interestingly, if you pay attention to Starbucks logo, they did something not that long ago. This only happened about 5 years ago. There was a huge shift for them as a company. They went, I don't know if you remember, but before there was a circle around this, and it said Starbucks Coffee Company. You guys remember this? Or you guys, anybody old enough to remember this? Starbucks Coffee Company. But they actually became so popular as a brand that they removed those words. If you look at the logo now, it no longer has that around it, because the logo itself stood so well on its own, they no longer needed the lettering around it. They didn't need you to know who it was from, what the company was called, because when you saw the logo, you instantly knew. They're actually one of about only 25 brands in the world that can do this, where they only show you an image and you instantly know. This is the icon that you can see. It's actually a very interesting thing. And in fact, like if you see, what else do we have? We have other logos. This one, if you see Nike, right? Nike, this one's one of the most famous brands in the world. If you just see it. By the way, Phil Knight, when he got this swoosh designed, you know how much he paid for that? $35. He paid $35 to a graphic arts student who worked for him, and he got this logo that now is worth billions of dollars all over the world. Or you might know this logo. If you look at this, anybody know what this is? Yeah, when you see this one, you know that somebody's going to take your parking spot. You know, as soon as you see that one, that you've been waiting for that parking spot for 20 minutes and somebody's about to swoop in front of you. You know that, right? But you see these logos, and instantly you know what they mean. They mean something, they represent something. And so what we see is that at the beginning, we see that, yes, there's the word, the logos could mean that it's the inception of the entire world, and that would be the what of how things came to be. That's the how things came to be. But then you see the logo meaning like this icon, right? Where it's like the what is it? What is Jesus? And you're trying to figure out the what. But I want to talk today mostly about the why. And the why is actually the most important thing, and that's the identity that Jesus brings. Because this logos word also has another meaning. And this is one I don't know why, I've never heard this one talked about in a church before. And maybe there's a reason, maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. But I think this is actually incredibly important for us to understand. Because just give me some grace here for just a second here as we try to explain this. In the Greek culture that Jesus was born into, right? He's born into Rome, into a Greek culture. And if you know anything about the Greek culture, they loved to talk about philosophy. And recently I've been going back and reading Socrates and Plato and different things like that. And I was just recently ran into this where there was a thing that they were searching for, that all philosophers were searching for, and it was called the logos. You can find this in every writing of every philosopher. I promise you, if you Google search it right now, you will find a ton of information about the logos. There was a guy named Hierocles, and Hierocles, he created this, and he said that there's a logos, and it's the thing that animates humanity in the world. This is the thing that makes humanity tick. It's the thing that makes you run, and it's called the logos, and what they would call it is if you've discovered the logos, you discovered the meaning of life. If you discovered the logos, you found the purpose for life. Think about that for a second. And I think we all are searching for this all the time. We're all trying to find out what the purpose, what the meaning of life is, right? We're all searching for this on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. We're trying to find what the meaning of life is. And this logos is that. If you found the logos, you found the meaning of life, which is unbelievable. And for hundreds, literally hundreds of years, people were searching for the logos. For hundreds of years, people were looking for this logos to know what the meaning of life was. And there became debates about it. So we actually see some of the early philosophers started to say that the meaning of life was people. The earliest we see is this Hierocles. He would say that the meaning of life was family or relationships or your other people around you. That's the meaning of life. This logos was people. Maybe the people around you and the relationships you pour yourself into. That's what it would be. And that's a fine theory. And then we saw later that people were starting to look at this in the Essenes, especially in the Stoics and the Epicureans. The Epicureans, if you know anything about them, they were just a party bunch, and they believed that the meaning of life was pleasure. Whatever brought you pleasure is what the meaning of life was. If you found pleasure in something, that was the meaning of life. And so they were kind of the people who, like, constantly, I think every day they just played the Black Eyed Peas, and they were just like constantly, I got a feeling, woo-hoo. And they, like, that was their day to day, is that they were partying. Like, that's how they lived. But then you had another group that was called the Stoics, and the Stoics believed that your logos was your principles or your performance. Like, if you did everything right, if everything was put together, if everything was done right, that was your logos. That's how you knew that you were going to find the meaning of life is you by doing everything right, everything morally good that you could possibly do. That's what it was. And then we even see Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. They had their own beliefs of proof, I would call it, is that they believed if you could rationalize anything, if you could find reasons behind things, if you were just so intellectually smart, then that was the meaning of life, was to be so intellectual. And none of these are bad in and of themselves. Let me say this real quickly. None of these are bad by themselves. But think about these when taken to an extreme. If the meaning of life is simply the relationships we're in, then it becomes a dangerous thing because we have just poured all of our identity into somebody else. If the meaning of life is your performance, if it's what you do, then think about this taken to an extreme is you have now lost who you are. You have become what you do. When taken to an extreme, if that's our identity, guys, this is why we see this problem happening so much of us getting wrapped up in work and as workaholics. It's because we think what we do is more important than who we are. If we think that the meaning of life is this idea that we go after being principled in our performance and the things that matter in that way, then it becomes dangerous to us because that's where religion starts to creep in, by the way, and where we think that we just have to act religiously and then everything will be fine. And we have to remember that Jesus didn't come to bring a new religion. He came to bring a relationship, right? If we start to think that our identity is wrapped up in our intellect, the problem will be that someday we will come to the end of that intellect and we will lose our intellect. We will not be able to answer certain questions about the universe. We will not be able to find all of the things that we want to find. There will come a day where the proof will not be there anymore, and we have to wonder what will happen to our identity when that's what happens. I mean, this is a huge issue that I think we still deal with. Most people would say that those four philosophies of the Logos are still the ones we live by today. This is why, by the way, we see millennials especially changing jobs like every 3 months is because we're looking for purpose in a place that we won't find it. So we keep looking for another one. Well, I've got to find purpose in this job. I got to find purpose in this place. And therefore, we keep changing jobs looking for the purpose. Or we find this in relationships, right? Is that we see this a lot in why relationships are so short-term. Even marriages are so temporary because we start to put all of our identity in the other person. And when that doesn't work out, when something goes wrong, when that person lets us down, then we're not sure what our identity looks like anymore. And now we're stuck again. We go back to, wait, where was I? What was I doing? And we start to wonder, who am I in the midst of this, right? These are very normal things that we start to deal with. We find this in our performance, in the way that we do our jobs. We also find it in the way we do relationships. We find it in the way we handle ourselves. We put ourselves into these other things, and when they don't pan out, we wonder who we are and what the meaning of all this is. And we really struggle with this. I will say the millennial generation, Gen X, like all the way down to, especially millennials right now, though, we see meaning it's a huge part of our lives. People don't want to just buy something anymore. They want to have a meaning behind why they're buying something, right? We're seeing this cause-driven thing. It's important to us, but at the same time, we can get lost in looking for meaning instead of actually finding meaning. And what we find here in this book of John is what he's saying is in the beginning, all the way back there, all the way since the beginning and even now, was the Logos. Your purpose has been there all along. Your purpose will not be found in your profession. Your purpose will not be found in your personal life. Your purpose will not even be found in your people around you. Your purpose will only be found in this person of Jesus. That's the purpose. That's the meaning. He says, in the beginning was this Logos. This Logos has been there long before you and I, and it will be here long after. Was the Logos, the purpose. And the purpose, the Logos, was with God. And this purpose, it actually was God. You and I were designed for this relationship over everything else. You and I were designed in the image of this creator so that we could glorify this creator. And the moment we start to take our eyes off of that and we start to try to find purpose somewhere else, we have missed our meaning altogether. This is a brilliant line. He's talking to us today, I think, as much as he was talking to the philosophers of his own day. And notice what he says. He says in verse 2, he was with God in the beginning. Notice that now it's no longer just a Logos. It is a person. This is a person, not just a proof or a person around you or people around you or a profession or whatever. It's a person. Jesus was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life. Do you see what he's doing? This philosophy that he's pushing forward is in him was life. The life you're searching for is the life that he brings. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. This is the clarity that he brings. In him was life, and that life is the light, that he is going to bring clarity, not confusion. It's the light of all mankind, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Let me just say, as we think about the moment that we're in today, I've sat with friends over the last just couple weeks even, who've had big losses, who've had difficult times. I have a friend, his name's John, his brother was diagnosed with cancer right before all of this COVID stuff happened. And just recently, his brother passed away. And I just watched John be in such turmoil. And the interesting thing about John, what I loved about John, was that he wanted his brother to know Jesus really badly. He wanted his brother to know Jesus. And I watched as John wrestled with this, because what he started to ask himself, and I love this, was he started to ask himself, do I want him to know Jesus because I want him just to go to heaven after he dies? Or do I want him to know Jesus because I want him to know him right now, personally, so that it changes his life, not just in the future, but in the present, in this moment right here? And he had to wrestle with this because he's watching a person who's going to leave him. And after his brother left, he had a lot of questions for himself about, what does this mean for me? We've watched people who have lost jobs. And I have a friend, he just lost a job over the last few months here. As I sat with him, I watched as he wrestled with, what's the point of all this? What's the purpose behind this? What's going on? Because he had wrapped himself so much in his job that once he lost his job, he felt like he lost part of his life. Men, we're terrible about this, by the way. We're terrible about this. As soon as we lose that profession, and I'm not saying I would be any better, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying this is a real issue in our culture, is that the moment we lose that job, that profession, that thing that we think validates us and makes us who we are, it brings up some huge questions in our lives about, wait, who am I? What is my purpose? If it's not that profession, the thing that I do, then what is it that I am? And I've sat with people who have lost jobs over this time, and they are wrestling with this question of, what is my purpose if you subtract my profession? I talked to a guy just the other day. His name's Chris, and he was wrestling with some things in his life because there were people in his family who had just gone through this nasty divorce. There was unfaithfulness on one side of the relationship, and it was a really difficult thing. And it was very interesting to see how he wrestled with it, because his reasoning was that a person had now hurt him, which makes sense, but also inside of that he saw it as, but I did everything right. I did everything right, so why would this happen to me? This is the problem with putting everything we have into performance. Thinking, this is again where religion gets us, thinking that if I just do everything right, that God's like some kind of vending machine that I put in the right amount of change, therefore everything goes my way. What happens when that doesn't go that way? When all of our actions aren't right, where's our identity found? What's the purpose? What's the meaning behind all this? Because I did the right performance of things. Now I should get the things that I want. What happens when that breaks down? There has to be something deeper. There has to be something more there. And what John's saying is, absolutely there's more there. And the problem is, all of these lights around you, all of the people around you, all of the jobs around you, all of the things around you, they are going to fade. They are a light that will shine in the darkness, but eventually the darkness will overcome them. That's just the reality. The people around you, I guarantee they will let you down at some point. The darkness will overcome them at some point. The job that you put all of your effort into, someday that thing could end, and the darkness may shine. It might overpower what that light is shining into. You might have things in your life that you think, if I put all my eggs in this basket, it's all going to work out. I don't know what a Christmas metaphor for eggs in the basket is. Like, if you put all your toys in this stocking, then it's going to all work out or whatever. You might feel that way. If I just do this, then it's all going to come together. It's all going to work out. And you put all of who you are into that. And what John's saying is, that's not your purpose. That's not your meaning of your life. That's not the identity. All of those things are found in this Logos. This Logos is now shining into our darkness. In fact, it even shone into death itself. And that darkness has not overcome it. That today you and I still have this light and this life, this purpose, this identity. And while everything around you might feel dark, I promise you that there's a light above you that is still there and is still shining. And this Christmas, as we look at our lives, and especially in this season, my challenge, my question for you is, what are the things that you're putting your effort and your energy into that may be things that are temporary lights that will eventually burn out? And how do we shift our focus, our attention, and even our identity into this Logos that is shown in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it? And I have to ask, on behalf of my friend John, who always pushes me for this, the way that he had these conversations with his brother, if you are in a spot, whether you're here in the room or you're online, and you're not following Jesus, if this is not the identity that you have built your life on, then I have to ask you, what are you waiting for? Because I guarantee that over this season, you've seen a lot of things that you thought were once so stable and so solid that have fallen flat. And this is the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not and will not overcome it. If you'd like to know more about that, you can always send us an email, and we would love to get you a yes packet. If you're here in the room, we'd love to get you that, which is just a way to start your relationship with Jesus. We'd love to be a part of that journey with you. We think that's so, so important. If there's nothing else we do in this room, we want you to follow Jesus. We don't want you getting stuck on teaching. We don't want you getting stuck in worship, whatever it is. We want you following Jesus, because that's where our identity is found. Today, if you would, let's stand as we sing, as we close this time together. I want to pray for you. Jesus, I thank you so much for being the Logos, being the meaning, the purpose for why and how we exist. And we get so hung up on what it is that we exist for or how this whole thing came to be. We get so stuck on all these other questions. And what we need to be asking ourselves is why? Why do we exist? And I thank you for this answer that we see that is an ancient, ancient answer. We exist for you. We exist because of you. That without you, we do nothing. With you, we do everything. That you are the light and the life. So today, Jesus, we pray that you would show us the things that we have put so much energy, so much effort into, that you would show us all the other areas of our life that we have tried so hard and put so much energy, so much effort, so much time into, that may be things that we think are our identity, and it turns out that they're just lights that are going to go out soon. Pray today that you would show us how we can fix our eyes and fix our lives around you as our identity, our purpose, our meaning. We're sorry for the things that we've taken for granted. We're sorry for the times we've taken our eyes off of you. And I pray that this Christmas season we would firmly fix our eyes on you. We would see you clearly. And we would let everything else fade away as we focus on you as the light of the world. And because of you, we know that all is bright. We love you so much. We thank you for your love for us, for your grace for us, for your just constant care for us. Praise things in your name. Amen.
Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you.
you so much for joining us this morning. We're so happy to be able to worship with you. As Kevin said, if there's anything that you want to process, if you want to pray about, we love to do that with you. So we're always around. And if you're watching online, you can also send us an email and connect with us that way. We would love to know how we can be praying for you. Students tonight, 4 p.m., will be here at the college for any girls that want to come to Bible study at Panera at 3:15. This week, there's a few people that are a group of friends that are going to do some stargazing at Starkey. If you would like to join us for that, let me know. And then we've got an outdoor movie night at the Stampers on Friday. So we hope that you will join us for any and all of that, and we hope that you have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.